think the logo needs to be bigger. Well, hopefully we're live.
I guess we've got no way of knowing.
We are live, but we can't see any of our faces, so that's fun.
Oh, there we are.
There we go.
Ta-da!
Just seamless.
Absolutely flawless. Good work, Ben.
Pro level, that was. Amazing. Okay. Hello and welcome to Robot Dice Explosion. I'm Ben. That's all. That's all there. So yeah, this is a Bushido Q&A with the GCT team about the Shiho and any other stuff that people are interested in. The sort of running of it will be, we'll talk about the whole production of the Shiho faction, and then we'll go into Q&As. A bit more detailed than that, but that's the general idea. So, yeah, just above me you've got Gordon, deals with like basically all the production headaches, the main man. We've got Jason.
Hello.
Rules. We've got Andy all the way up there, who's like rules.
Yes, it's very clear what I do.
Rules and law, dog's body.
Yeah.
Alex does the socials, all the way at the top. And then we've got Alistair, who is fiction writer person. So, yeah, I did say before we started this that I was going to get everyone to introduce themselves, so
Those are official titles as well, then.
I've nailed it. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I'm Artie Watsits. That's what I do. So, yeah, shall we get started? I can't remember what the order of stuff is that we've got written down. I'm going to get a document open.
Cool.
Okay, so live, troubleshoot Ben's bloody audio as is tradition. Have we done that?
I think, yeah, we did that like
Okay,
20
well
minutes
then we
ahead
can
of time.
move on to...
Does anyone in chat confirm that they can hear us, first of all?
Oh yes, so
Is everybody audible?
well, according to... Oh no, we're all back on the stream. That's cool. We disappeared as black squares for a moment.
I think it's when Ben fiddles with it.
It is. I'm just going to stop fiddling with anything, so I can't see anything other than just all your faces.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, well, I might as well make a start then. Obviously, we'll keep it as brief as I can. The Shiho is a big, exciting project for us. Long time in development. For you, anyone that's been playing Bushido for a while, you'll know that the Shiho have been in the background in the game since the beginning. So this was quite a good opportunity for us to bring them to life, which was super exciting for us. And we took quite a detailed approach when we came to doing the Shiho overall, in terms of we wanted them to visually look different, which is a lot harder than you would imagine when you focusing on one kind of pick in terms of samurai, etc. It's quite difficult to make them appear very different, considering we already have a couple of pure samurai factions, but also, as everyone that plays Bushido knows, they needed to play very differently. So it took a long time to get to where we are with it, but I think, and as hopefully you'll see, and you've been seeing, that I think it's been worth it. The models are great, the law's great, and above all, they play and feel very different to any of the other Bushido factions, which is a key element for us, I think, in any new faction that we bring out. So obviously Jason's been doing the rules, so he'll run us through a bit of what makes them cool and what makes them unique in their terms of game style. Then, so over to you, Jace.
Yeah, so we didn't have much to go on really. The Shiho, for people who played last edition, it was the last faction that was mentioned in the rule book for New Dawn, so people knew they were coming. And really, all that was said was that Errata had returned, and he was leading a guerrilla war. And that was pretty much it. So we sort of concentrated on that, tried to expand it to make a full faction's worth of mechanics. Alistair came up with a lot of good real-world references that we could use to start building, and that's where things like the tunnel entrance and the traps and the wooden spikes and things came from. But we really needed to make them play different to the other samurai factions. There's no point bringing out a whole new faction that plays the same as the prefecture or whatever. So we've got our glass cannon, super high damage Alpha Strike Ito clan. We've got our super slow tank and lots of damage Minamoto faction. We've got the Prefecture, who are the structured army. So the one we have left is the Shiho out of the original ones. Obviously, there are more in the lore, but the one we have left to do was the guerrilla war, and we really wanted to exemplify that. So to break it right down to the basics, I wanted the Shiho to be unpredictable. You don't know, as their opponent, where they're going to attack. You don't know what they're going to do when they attack, or even if you attack them, they're still unpredictable. And we made that work in the macro level so that there's lots of the flank trait. They come on from the sides. You don't know which side they're coming on. They got their own extra trait called Booted, which basically improves the flank trait. And that makes it so that they can reach further into the board with flank. They also have the Hayman peasants, which mid-game you can decide, oh, this one was actually a samurai all along. You swap it over and somebody's just charged in with their big model, and now all of a sudden, instead of crushing a peasant, he's surprised by a samurai, which can be bad for you, it turns out. We also try to do it on the sort of the personal level. So the Shiho have a lot of abilities which other factions would get as active abilities as instants. So things like their armor-piercing feats that grant PS1, instead of being active, so you have to be the attacker, they get it as instant. So you might attack them and they might suddenly decide, you know what, I'm going to go all out on the attack. And you just don't know what they're going to do, whereas other clans would be more predictable. So we tried to wind that in everywhere. But the other thing you will have noticed about the release is that we did it in a very narrative way. Alistair was quite key to this, so he'll probably be good to talk about next. But we introduced, with the new edition, the Drunken Master Hiroto. And he came about with his Oni friend, eldest brother. And sometime after that, we released the Wolf Clan. The Wolf Clan, as a reaction to Hiroto coming back to Joie, have had a part of their clan break away and be in open rebellion. Later on, we released the Brotherhood, and that's all of Hiroto's friends from when he was out on adventures, going around the mainland and the Empire, and possibly even beyond. And the friends and alliances he made along the way, those people have come back with him now. And that's all led up to this point where we release the faction as a whole. I think people have started to see the individual models now and have already started to work out lists and how to use the abilities. So I'm not going to go too much into that. I think Andy's done a tactics article for the starter set as well, which I think's gone up. So we don't need to go too much into that. But do you want to talk about the narrative parts, Alistair?
Yeah, I mean, basically they're designed around a guerrilla force, and obviously now that they're not in control of the prefecture anymore, they've had to make do with what they've got. So they're relying heavily on resources, natural resources that they have around them. And one of the ideas that Gordon and I had was the fact that they have to be mobile, heavily mobile, and be able to survive in the wild. So you'll see that's why. They're all wearing capes and stuff like that, sort of rain gear that they can camouflage easily, and yeah, that's why we brought in the trap element as well. So that obviously they've got access to bamboo and ambushing and things like that. So it was just a natural progression of that sort of guerrilla fighter ethos that you'll find in any sort of small scale army, across history. Yeah, and that's kind of it, really. I mean, it was always a case of them being fleet of foot on the move, ambushing, taking what they can, and then just disappearing, striking, and just leaving more terror than actual, sort of wholesale destruction.
But one thing we did have to avoid, as well as being different from the samurai clans, is that that's also a good description of what the Dissension do as a faction. And I think if you look at them, you can see that they will play very different to the Dissension, even though it's still that hit and run. You might not go into combat to kill something, you might go into combat to waste their activations or for the movement that you get out of it. But yeah, there is some links there. Obviously, they are the Eagle clan, so the Eagles among the Tengu will see some kinship with people who've been sort of blessed by the Eagle kami and bear the mon of the Eagle. You'll see some shared special cards as well that the Tengu and the Shiho both use. But we tried very hard to make sure they don't play the same way. They're not playing the same game.
Right then. No one knows who's going next.
Smooth transition.
To that point, like it is interesting how you've got essentially like 3 mobility factions in the Dissension, the Shiho, and the Ito, and they all do it differently. And people, I think, often underestimate how much mobility means. It's not just about killing people; it's about getting objectives done. And I'm scared of the Shiho from that point of view.
Well, if it's any consolation, Bakemono Savage Wave seems to do really well against them.
I do have a few. I pick them out. I'll stick to my Ito for now.
The playtesting for them was interesting. There's a certain archer who my initial impression of him was entirely wrong. It's like, yeah, he should be about the same rice as Kaihime. That was wrong in every way, shape, or form. I also discovered that having too many Heimin is something of a problem. If you don't have the samurai to come onto the board. So they got their chief eat from that. And Booted, I know it's been around since the start of Risen Sun, but that came about because we noticed how Kamikaze interacts with Queen of the Waves flanking. Because you could get models into the board much further than normal. We were just like, well, if people could just walk instead of having to play this card twice, and if we just have a faction of these dudes, hey presto. They're definitely an interesting faction to have tested. There's, they have a lot of very cheap, I would normally say poorly statted samurai, but they're only poorly statted for fighting you directly in melee. They're very well statted for shooting you in the face. And they have a lot of abilities to do that. Like quite a lot of the virtue token mechanics and just the theme cards will just be like, okay, my guys just move out of your zone of control. And if I've got the tactical roll, someone's getting shot in the face. It's a extremely common occurrence, which is they function very well as sort of targeted assassination warbands. So if your opponent has like an expensive model, if someone brought Ryujin, hey presto, you've got 3 figures coming in who have all got bows and going to shoot that enormous model from pretty much wherever they like.
Yeah, and remember, you can, depending on the theme you're playing, of course, you might be able to take the 2 wolf samurai with bows as well.
Yeah.
They could, I think they can actually field more archers than anybody else.
Yeah. Is it Nobuko? Nobuko. Yeah, he's like the monster hunter, effectively, sort of emergent property of him now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they are similar to the wolf ones, and remember the wolves are a full part of the Shiho faction. They are Shiho models, so they're treated like Shiho models for take. They're not a separate clan or a separate faction or anything. So they will be interacting quite a lot. You'll see a lot of these archers have been designed as hybrid melee archer models, which often means either it's a melee model with a bow or it's an archer model with some good special attacks and defenses. And that hybrid ability means you can take lots of them because you can't just be engaged to nullify them. If you play a prefetcher gun line, if you can just run 3 Bakemono in contact with the arquebuters, then that's it. You've rendered them useless for the rest of the game because they're not going to kill even a Bakemono, and they don't really have any way of getting out of combat to start shooting or reloading again. Whereas the Shiho, if you get into combat with them, they're still competent combat models. They have lots of ways of walking off and leaving you to get shot. I think the one thing that people will take time to get used to is the inexperienced or aged and decrepit samurai with melee 2, and the grizzled veteran Ashigaru with melee 3. Even though the Ashigaru have no other combat abilities, and the samurai have been trained, so they've got all the prowess and combo attack and.
Yeah, I don't know if we've actually explained what the reasoning behind that is. Or did I zone out while I was looking at something?
We haven't explained it here.
So, like the narrative reason for that sort of decision.
Yeah. So again, we looked at the history that we had, and there's something like only 5 fighting age samurai survived the last battle of the dragon. What I've taken to calling the usurpation rather than the dragon wars.
No, shut your face. We have all rulers.
Well, I was in a Shiho mindset. I have to think of them as being the usurpers. Yeah. So,
Robert De Niro.
So yeah, so the samurai that they have in the faction today, apart from Errata, really, are just the those who were too old to fight, and so were sent with the children, and the children who were far too young to fight, many carried away from the battlefield, and that's all that's left of the Shiho clan. So these people have been brought up, they've been trained, the young ones have been trained with the sword, so they are samurai. They have the prowess trait, which signifies a samurai sword training. Most of them have good special attacks and defenses, which is a samurai thing. They have all the best special abilities to make them good in combat, but they just haven't fought in any battles yet because they're all like 12.
Just while we're sort of talking about that, for those kind of players out there who might not have access to some of the earlier books with the kind of background, how far departed are we from the Dragon Wars, Alistair?
Things about initially it was 15 years for the first lore book, and I think this one, off the top of my head, I think it's probably about another 5. I'll probably stand correction on that, but yeah, we're probably about 20 years down the line. But it hasn't been an easy time. You know, there's been constant change within the empire and the prefecture as well. So nothing's even really had a time to bed down and gain sort of solidity. Everything's been in flux, especially now originally with the Savage Wave. You know, once the Dragon Wars had sort of come to an end, and everything else just started kicking off. So there's never been that real sort of time period where everyone can just sort of say, right, I'm in control. This is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to be going forward. So probably looking at about 15, 20 years after the end of that. So those kids would have initially, as Jason was saying, they would have been hidden because obviously if they were found, they would have been killed. So from a fiction point of view, they've just been on the run, the entire time. Learning what they can, and I think that's why we went for the preposition of the bows, because obviously they use those to hunt, and again it's a great ambush weapon, from a sort of historical point of view. That's why there's no shoes and things like that, and very cool rain hats. So yeah, the poverty stricken. Yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Something to say and it's gone. It was along the lines of I think it's pretty cool how the narrative is coming out in rules in little ways like that. The Ashigaru are
the ones with good stats,
experienced, and the samurai are in theory good, but unproven. Yeah, and you also see that with the the vengeance stuff is reflecting the background, and some of it's vengeance Takashi, some of it's vengeance prefecture, I think.
Yes, I think Jason.
Yeah, usually we would probably keep that simple by having it the same for everybody, but it came through as being a very important distinction actually, in both from lore-wise, where if somebody's been brought up to say, these people were the reason that we were cast out, and we're not the ruling clan, and we're living in the dirt and sleeping in mud every night. That's one thing, and so they grow up with vengeance Takashi because it's Takashi that did it. But the real zealots, the people who take it even further, are the ones who are going to extend that just to the ordinary fighting men, who are just villagers who get conscripted into the army, or I guess some of them would join the army voluntarily as well. But that's not someone associated with them in any way. Even if you're a Michi priest and you're with the Takashi, then that's it. You've signed your death warrant, and we hate you. So we allowed that bit of complexity in to keep that lore connection and the rules connection as well, because depending if you play Claws of the Dragon, that rule might not do anything. If it's Vengeance Takashi, you might not have a Takashi at all. But if you play Blood of the Dragon, then they're all going to hate you. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, I like that. I think early on, some retainers were sceptical that would be balanced insofar as
it's one of those. Vengeance is always difficult to balance because it either does nothing or it's very good. And the way I usually do it is to give it to the model for free, and if it proves to be a problem, then we can redress it later. Like we could always put in an event or an enhancement card in a cycle deck where the Takashi are like, okay, I've had enough of these Shiho now, so maybe they get bonuses against people with Vengeance Takashi.
We get vengeance on vengeance.
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 That won't confuse anyone.
I mean, I had quite good success with them and hitting them in the face.
This is with Old's Prefecture, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, see, rightful rulers, none of this.
You can usually cut their heads off still. It would still work. If you play Blood of the Dragon and you roll a double, they usually still die.
Yeah.
Easy.
Just simple as that.
That's just how it works.
I wonder if it's worth talking about like the whole process of putting this faction together. Like it's been a weird year for everyone, and we've been putting this together during a pandemic and like play testing during a pandemic, which like I've barely played any games. So that's a lot to talk about. But yeah, Gordon, I wonder, like, a lot of the time people ask me, what's the starting point for a miniature or for a faction? Like, is it the feel? Is it the art? What comes first?
I think to be honest, it's very different depending from a model to a faction. I think for Bushido particularly, if we're going to do a faction, for one, I know I keep repeating, but I think it's quite important that the faction feels different from another faction. You don't want to just do another faction for the sake of doing another faction if it feels and plays exactly like one of the previous factions. Kind of becomes pointless to do. So I think for a faction, when you get an idea, it's fundamentally how you develop that faction. It's all good and well, coming up with 6, 7, 10 profiles or whatever the case may be that get you started in the faction, but there has to be longevity in the faction. It's got to be interesting, it's got to play different, and so I think if you're doing a faction, it's firstly designing around a key mechanic, I guess, that makes that faction play very differently, which is a key for Bushido, I think, and I think players generally agree. I think the factions play very differently. So the first point is that it's essentially making sure you have enough material in gameplay to develop that faction that you can play down the line. Once that's out the way, the technical part, then the cool, fun stuff can follow. Then you just decide aesthetically, what that faction's going to look like, how it's going to appear. Be a lot of discussions about visually what it'll look like. We'll do a mood board essentially, of things you like, your colors, palettes, images. Doesn't necessarily have to be, just stuff that incorporates how you feel overall that faction will go. Then it's articulating that into some written word, and then at that point, once we're at that point, obviously myself and Jason Alistair will have some conversations about where we take the faction, both in terms of lore and games profiles. We'll draw up some concept ideas, models we think will work within the faction, etc. Jason will play around with the profiles for those for a while, make sure that they function. And then once we get something that kind of works, we'll start looking at getting some concept art done for that model. And then obviously we'll develop it from the concept out. Now, with the Shiho, we've done it slightly different in that we've done a large volume of models, concepts, and ideas at the same time, more than we would normally done, more than we had done for any other faction. Multiple reasons. One, I thought it would give us a very unified feel through the faction. Visually, it would be quite cool. Sculpting would essentially become slightly easier, I thought. I'm sure Ben can probably correct me on that. But just in the sense that, you'd be sculpting in the same line, in the same vein, and you would hopefully keep the same sculptors on board to do lots of the models and etc. As it turns out, I think it worked out pretty well, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, there was no major dramas. I know Ben mentioned doing it through the pandemic, but I mean, most of the groundwork had been done long before COVID came around, which we were quite fortunate for. So it gave us actually quite a good free time, if you will, which we could work on a lot of the stuff through the last 18 months or whatever the case. And it probably helped us actually bring the release date for the Shiho slightly forward, if to be perfectly honest with you. Just it gave, a lot of people could get stuff done, had spare time. So I think we get to where we are now. Once, like I said, once the concepts are done in that process, I hand it over to you, Ben, who then liaises with sculptors. He does all the sculptor management, and I just give feedback on that, really, when I see stuff we're not liking. And I think for the Shiho, people probably won't have noticed because there's not enough profiles out in it, but we did give a bit more creative license to the sculptors this time around, in that we didn't diligently stick to the concept art. So you'll notice there's some, posing difference, and some guys might not have hats on where they're doing the concept art and stuff like that. But again, it was because we had the time, which allowed us to look and so how can we make this model better than the concept? Because often something in 2 dimensions in an art will look pretty cool, but it doesn't always translate directly into a 3D sculpt and stuff like that. I mean, I know we've been doing digital sculpting for a long time. I still struggle for my eye to see how things were always perceiving a 3D model and stuff like that. So sometimes I'm even surprised when we get the print. It's like, oh, okay, this is what it actually looks like. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I mean, I think that gives a kind of outline. I don't know if you need any more specifics on that, Ben, but I think it gives you kind of a good breakdown on the process we take.
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak to the sculpting side of it. I've not done any of the sculpting on any of the Shiho models other than terrain. So I've mostly been managing Kevin, who did all the Wolf Clan guys, all the Tanakas. And we had a chat when you were dropping the art in my Dropbox about who to give it to, and I mean, you came into that chat being like, I'd like him to do it, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. He's well suited. He does the does like tatty clothing really well. So he basically was given the whole faction to sculpt, not just the release wave, but things which will come along later. And what's nice about working with Kevin is that he will very often give us a couple of different options for posing. He'll look at the art and he'll create like that pose and do another couple. And so occasionally, like Maki, actually, who's on screen now, she's an example, and Hiroto, of where, given the status of Hiroto, he thought that maybe he should be in a more dynamic pose, and he provided us with a couple of options, and we went with the one that you see there. I love that the slideshow is just lining up with what I want to talk about. Great.
So, I think you planned it, Ben.
Well, they would be grossly mistaken. So yeah, I think the thing that was really important with the Shiho was maintaining consistency. Obviously, having like one sculptor working on it is good, and he will maintain a library of parts. It's not something which is unique to digital sculpting, but it's a lot easier with digital sculpting to go, I have that hat, I'll put that there, maybe I'll mirror it and tatter it up in a bit of a different way, and now it's a different hat. But it also means that it's allowed us to do things like if a miniature has a hat which is optional, well, not optional because I have a flat head, but separate, I think they pretty much all have the same plug. So there's like a consistency of parts across the range. So yeah, once Kevin's got it through a couple of stages and I've given him some feedback, Gordon weighs in. Sometimes we catch rules things, so something's on the wrong base size. Hopefully we catch that. There are a couple of exceptions where we've missed those in the past. So yeah, then with the Shiho, I've been responsible for all the scaling and the cuts. So more of a technical role, I suppose. So if anyone has any issues with the comparative scaling of miniatures, I don't want to know. Scaling is
too late.
It's an eternal headache. Even digitally, where you can like move things up and down. You've got different sculptors with different styles, different proportions creep in, because we try and keep everyone able to express their own style. So yeah, I think that's
I was amazed with the first time I saw the painted one, certainly with the Heimin and the samurai, where you can really look at them and imagine that literally any of those samurai could have been wearing that cloak
yeah.
a moment ago. That was my favourite thing, because I wrote the rule for it, and as soon as I saw the model, I was like, that's exactly what I want. Yes.
Yeah. So I think real kudos to the painter up there as well, keeping that consistency.
Or it could, in fact, even just be a hay bale underneath that cloak.
Oh, the terrain piece.
Yeah. So I mean, I took a shortcut with the terrain this year. Again, having been a weird one, I've slipped further and further behind on the things I'm meant to be doing. So with him, he is essentially one of the Heimin that Evan sculpted. I think I may have mirrored him and then sort of pushed things around a little bit to make him print as one piece. And so he's obviously consistent with these guys on screen. It's happening again. Love it. But yeah. What you look cool.
I do have a practical question. How do they see through their hats?
Well, yeah. How do they fire their massive bows with a hat? I think one guy is wearing his hat. So no one's going to see him on this stream, I don't.
No.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
They don't need to see where they're shooting in. They trust.
Is that good?
It's a unique Shiho skill.
Yeah.
Just put it
Is
down
that
as that.
heroic?
I think they're channeling their inner Michael Jackson with their hat pulled down low. And they're, just...
I mean, I don't think anybody's seen it yet, but it literally is a Shiho skill that will be on the next archer you see. So.
I hate that guy so much.
There was a couple of things near the end as well, where it was very interesting because the sculpts came back with completely different weapons than the concepts, which it makes sense that early on we were going to say that the Shiho, because they're deviating from the traditional way of the samurai's warfare so much, they were going to try and keep their personal honor by only using katanas and the samurai longbow. But we basically, the artists and the sculptors said that was boring and they're all identical. So they changed that, but nobody told me until I saw the sculpts. So I was quickly like, oh, this one's now going to Naginata, let's change her around. And
yeah, we might have some areas to improve on communication.
I mean, it worked out in the end. I do think it looks fair. We can't do a whole faction that way as well. So I think it did work out for the best. So that was quite fun near the end when all the playtesters were sort of like, why have you changed all the weapons on these models?
I think the thing is, you can talk about design space, can't you? And that is for the sculpting side of it as well as the games design side of it. You've got to have almost like headroom. You've got to have other places that you can go other than the initial vision, because by making it a faction, you're committing to like consistent expansion.
It's always a circular thing as well. Like I have I get a concept, or I give a concept to Gordon, and then that goes to the artist, and it usually comes back, and we make tweaks to the profile based on what the final sculpt or art piece looks like. And then sometimes it's the other way as well. I think there was an Ito one recently where I pointed out what species of snake he was, and then you went, "Oh right, I'll tell the sculptor," and that sort of solved a lot of issues.
Yeah, we added a detail there that is really cool. And actually, in that case, it has to be cryptic, but in that case, that detail that he added, he then mirrored that detail on the guy's weapon, which I thought was a really cool touch. I didn't have to tell him to do that; he just did it. Yeah, one of the I just want to talk briefly about the terrain pack that that I've been working on. So we had no artwork for those, so we essentially just had the cards, and I just went and did some sculpting based on the rules and so on. But they were going to be produced at one point in resin, cast resin. But I think if anyone looks at the wooden stakes piece, and if you look at like any sort of wooden stakes thing, like producing that in any quantity in resin would be an absolute. So we pivoted to doing them as directly 3D printed, especially because we're not sure how long they're around for. That's something we're still not sure. But anyway, so when people get them, they will find that they are a little bit different to work with. Anyone who hasn't used any 3D printed miniatures before, you'll find that you'll have to clean up some supports. I've been doing all the printing myself, and I have gone through and removed a lot of supports, but there will be some smaller ones on the underside, especially on the tree, the hidden eyrie. So you'll have to go through and do a little bit of clean up there. There's no mould lines, so at least there's, you know, swings and roundabouts, you know. Oh, and we kept plastic bases rather than printed or cast bases, because dimensional accuracy is just a lot easier to achieve.
If you have a sample with you, Ben, you could just show the...
So I was meant to bring samples home from work, and I utterly forgot. So we've got who have we got? We've got Alex.
Samples.
Yeah. So I'm gonna make your face big. Hold on.
Oh no! Don't do that. Don't do that.
I have the power.
Yeah. So
Errata beard, eh?
Yeah, that's it. Channeling my inner Hiroto. Yeah. So Am I big yet?
Yep.
Am I big?
You tell me.
Good. Yeah. So obviously we've got the chaps there. This comes in two separate pieces. You've got an MDF base. I've actually used a little bit of sculpting putty to sort of give it a bit of texture, similar to the concept art or the original sculpt. Really, really simple, really easy. Painted up just with some dry brushing and things. And then you've got the I don't know what the names of all these
hidden tunnel entrance.
Hidden tunnel entrance, that's the one. And again, that's a couple of pieces. You've got the base, but obviously that sort of rim that I've stuck down to a 50mm base, and then you've got the bamboo flap that just goes on top. It's quite nice. We've got the straw soldier that again I've tried to emulate the studio scheme there with the dark blue cloak. It's very much a work in progress, that one at the moment, but again absolutely, as Ben said earlier on, mirrors the actual kind of sculpt of the Heyman really well. And looks, in my eyes, it's the sort of thing you'd see on the horizon in the distance and think, oh, there's someone there, and sort of approach it with caution. And then my favourite is the Eyrie. Again, it's kind of work in progress at the moment, but this is, again, you just get it separate from the base, just glue it onto the base, and lovely detail. You've got the sort of the votives on the side there, attached with a bit of rope, a nice little eagle's nest at the top. Yeah, a lovely. They are just fantastic. Like you say, a little bit of structure, or support, should I say, still left on them for the cleanup, but cleans up no problems at all.
One of the advantages of 3D printing with that piece in particular is that you can get the full cavity inside the tree itself. So there's a modelling opportunity there for anyone who wants to stick, models inside it.
Yeah,
would be quite cool. I was going to put eagles on it, but in the end, like printability and shippability, we've already got those.
Well, if you go
stakes
to Mastercrafted Miniatures, they have a sprue of birds you could get.
Yeah, they're definitely not the Tengu birds that I sculpted about 7 years ago, or whatever it is. Yeah, they're not eagles, of course. So the eagles that the 3-pack that you can get for wait, yes, they are out. I just had a moment. You should be able to
Eagles of Rokan. Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to the one that stood on a post. You should on the top of the ear. So the terrain stuff. I don't know if we got.
One of the most common questions we've got is, will there be more terrain for other factions? Ben?
Well, I mean, not my call. You've been trying to get me to sculpt Ito terrain, which hasn't existed in this edition for years.
Look,
so,
I can make it exist at some point. If I badger Jason enough.
If I sculpt it, he'll have to write rules, I suppose.
Yes.
I mean, the answer from my point of view is if the decision amongst all of you, but largely this guy, is that that you want sculpted pieces, then I will put them on the list, with the caveat that the list is long and heavy. So not for a while. I mean, there is a reason why this is coinciding with the release of a faction. It's also, I think, from Gordon's point of view, I'm not going to put too many words in his mouth, but it's, sort of see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it probably sums it up quite well. I think we'd love to do it. Our schedule's quite busy, to be perfectly honest. So I would say that is a possibility, but not in the short term.
Well, that answers 5 different people's question.
Yeah, it's definitely been a common one that I've seen popping up. Like, I wasn't going to plug Mastercrafted, but if I find myself with excess time, I do sometimes do some Bushido or stuff. I try not to get in the way of the official stuff with that. So yeah, I'll probably do the odd thing, but nothing as involved as this set, because there's a reasonable amount of sculpting time involved in that. Took me away from sculpting a certain Bakemono.
No one needs more of those.
Yeah, this one will really make you sick. Yeah. Oh Christ! Okay, so we've run about 13 minutes over the half an hour that I had sort of roughly said for.
So should we run through the questions with only one-word answers then?
Is that just gestures? I think just like
so. Gordon.
Temperature dance.
Gordon, there's been a question here. There's been some hints, but when will we realistically expect to see the return of faction dice?
You don't have to hit very soon, it would be the actual answer. In fact, if people are interested, it's 11th, 12th, 13th. On Tuesday, the ship leaves China, and if people want, I could put a tracking thing up and you could track the ship. Due in Portsmouth on the 25th of August.
Portsmouth, you say?
Yeah, Portsmouth, yeah. So local, Ben. You pop down and clear it through customs if you want. 25th of August should be in Portsmouth, so some point soon after that, I'd imagine they'll become available. Yeah.
I was going to say, you've seen the prices that the old ones go for. I was thinking of maybe some might get lost. There's a container somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can maybe give people a preview of how they sound, Gordon. Is that something you can do right now?
The dice.
Yeah. People are desperate.
Yeah,
Nothing like that.
No, it's much better than that. Those are mere copies. Well, actually, no.
We have gone a bit fancy with them this time. They are definitely a better set than the previous set. They should last a bit longer as well. I know that some people, myself included, had a little trouble with the screen printed one. So
yeah,
these be fancy.
And I think one thing that I've, as a wargamer experienced before is issues with potential. Oh, what a reveal that is! Let's leave it there, Gordon. No more. Let's wait till maybe on Tuesday we'll share some images of the packaging. Maybe if we get that tracking link.
Exciting, man.
Or soon we'll share some images. But one concern for wargamers as a rule is the readability of dice, and I think these ones have really kind of hit that sweet spot between the kind of the flamboyant side and also the functional side, which is really good as well.
Yeah, I think Dean's going to take a lot of credit for that, to be honest. But if I think it was down to me, they'd be like super intricate. You'd never be able to tell what was even on them. But yeah. So,
but why are Jung pink?
Because they should be.
You asked for that particularly, eh?
Pink like a crab.
Okay, so before we reveal too much, we'll go on to the next question. So this is another question from the same person, actually asking, are there any plans or time frame on more wolf models to allow expansion of the Open Rebellion theme?
If you want the one-word answer, yes.
There we go. Let's move on. So we'll ask you another question, Jason, while you're still talking. Is there another scenario function you could do with Vims?
Yes, there's lots of things we could do, and when we look at more narrative scenarios rather than symmetrical competitive scenarios, I think we will do a lot more with Vims, and also things like multiple Vims, and things. Also, Honbasho has an interesting use of Vims where you have to kill the enemy Vim with your Vim, and if you don't, you both lose. So there's definitely a lot of things we can do with that. We haven't explored it a huge amount because a lot of the things that you'd want to do are not suitable for tournament play, and the scenarios we put out so far are in the tournament pack. We're definitely doing narrative scenarios. We're definitely doing sort of attacker defender asymmetrical scenarios. In fact, there's a page around somewhere which we might put up as a teaser which has a big list of new scenarios that's going to go up. Names of them at least, and so yes, there's lots that can be done.
Okay. Brilliant. And another question here, again from the same person, will hopefully be a quick answer from Andy. Now that the Eagle clan are out, when can we expect the Carp clan?
Soon, honest. Soon in Valve time.
So not at the end of this stream then.
So when Half-Life 3 comes out, about then.
There's a folder with CarpCon written on it, and it's got a sheet of one document in it, and it basically says, if the Jung are the pirates, these are the Navy, and that's as far as we've got. They're going to be like Hornblower. So we've done no profiling, no work on how the faction will work. I think we've only got four named Carp samurai in the entirety of the lore, so I don't expect too much tomorrow. Alistair might have written more by now, but
I have, yeah. I'm probably about 5,000 words into them already. So there's a fair bit of interesting stuff coming out, but not yet.
So if we go back to Andy again, how many Goomies are there in the Silver Moon Trade Syndicate? Quite an easy one to answer.
Unless Alistair has changed it, there are currently 5. The 2 that are currently missing are the 3 Moons, who are the money lending and, well, mostly the money people. They specialize in money lending. And the Blue Gulls, who are the smuggling and exotic imports and exports. So if you need a strange gorilla, say, extracted from some strange islands and brought back to Jima, the Blue Gulls are your people. And all the rest are currently covered in existing themes.
Great.
Cool.
Again, Andy, Alistair, you might be able to help with these. I'll roll these up into one question. Is there one person who rules over all the Goomies, and what is the main goal for the Silver Moon, except getting money?
Power, really. I think it's going to be power and the spread of their influence. Not necessarily overtly, but possibly just through necessity. Wars are expensive. People need money. The prefecture's in a bit of a dire straits at the moment because of the floods and the taxes being hiked, and people just cannot pay. There's wars in the empire. So, as I said earlier, everything's in a serious state of disrepair. So, if they were going to make a move, now would be the time to do it.
Yep, I
But it
agree with
wouldn't necessarily be in your face either. You know, you might lend money to someone who can lend someone money. You can lend someone money. But at the end of the day, if you're the source, you know, the source still has to get paid, or your legs get broken, or your empire gets destroyed, or whatever.
Or the leader gets killed. Who knows?
Yeah. I was going to say,
Or your leader disappears.
Who knows?
say they're more about having control
knows?
and influence than they're the power behind the throne, usually.
That's it. Yeah.
As
They're
for
definitely
having-
the iron fist.
Yeah. As for having a single person, I wouldn't think so, but who knows? Criminal empires have been built with the great man theory of history. Who knows? Alistair knows.
Yeah, I do. It could be. I'm not going to say that it is. It might be. You never know. Boss of bosses situation where you have the heads of different families. They might bow down to a certain individual, but whether that person would demand complete control and loyalty, I don't think so. I think that would be a fleeting thing. In a nutshell. So that's it.
Brilliant. So got a few more kind of faction-specific questions, and obviously it's a very tricky one to answer with regards to sort of what is coming in the future. But obviously a lot of focus on the Shiho at the minute. People are still sort of gunning for their faction. So I've got a few more questions around. Will there be any more kami or yokai joining the ranks of the Savage Wave? And then another one here asking about expansion of Ryu and their sub-factions, potentially with a themed warband box.
Well, the yokai for the Savage Wave, almost certainly at some point. Not in the short term, though, because the profiles for the next few releases, or more than a few, for the Savage Wave are already done. They do not include a yokai, I can tell you that. So for them, not short term. In terms of the other factions, and specifically you mentioned Ryu, every faction will get a themed warband box at some point, time permitting, when we can release those. Now, I'm not quite sure the schedule of release for those, but the prefecture definitely do have one coming, and so it will be, once it's obviously been worked on and we've brought it to a level where we can play it, we'll look at obviously starting the sculpts and stuff for that. So yes, in a roundabout way.
Brilliant. And stick with you, Gordon, again, potentially a difficult question to answer. We've got a question of when and if we're going to be seeing a new starter set, a new two-player starter set, sorry.
The when part is quite tricky. The if part is definite, and it's already a work in progress. I would ruin Jason's Easter egg into people who could possibly see something in his image, because no one's going to notice it. But relating to that, potentially, so it is work, ongoing work, and yeah.
The real question is that Ken?
We're all Ken.
They're all Ken, yeah, we all Ken. Timeline for that will definitely be this year, definitely. Hopefully, within the next 3 to 4 months, I'm guessing. That's if everything falls into place as it should. If not, then it'll be the early first quarter of next year. But it is quite a cool set. It's quite an exciting set, and we're doing something slightly different with it as well. So it's going to be quite exciting. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's great. There is actually a question in the YouTube chat as well from Nate Kolb asking whether there'll be an expansion into other countries in the world. Lots of potential there to explore.
In the lore-wise, I mean, we've already. It's so difficult what to say without giving too much away. Let's just say the Empire's a massive place, bigger than we could kind of imagine in kind of geographic terms that we would base our geographic knowledge of huge on. So there's definitely outside influences that influence the Empire, and who knows what's across the seas. And I mean, Alistair knows but we don't know just yet. Yeah.
You might have seen the new model in the previews at the start of the thing. I can probably tell you he's not from the Joir Isles.
See if I can find him. I've just taken manual control, but he's not in here somehow.
He has been popping up. He has been popping up. And just to clarify a few things as well with the artwork. Again, obviously, we were talking earlier on about the sort of the changes and the sort of sculpts from the concept. Some of the art you are seeing there, it may appear like multiple sort of different versions of the same model, and they are sort of the earlier concept sketches of those models. So just in case people are getting overly excited at sort of additional sort of similar unit models, they may or may not be coming. But,
yeah, usually if you see 3 sketches, it's I think Gordon and the artist trying to hone in on the character's essence before working it up into a full colour piece and then handing over to sculptors.
Yeah, well, I do know that there is a blurry image of that non-Juarian swordsman in the Bushido the Game Facebook group. So someone's managed to get a screen grab already of that. So yeah, we'll leave it at that for now, eh?
Good. Okay, what's next?
Well, I think that's. I mean, I have got questions from the last Q&A, but just with an eye on the time. I think we mentioned.
5.
Yeah, let's have a look. See if we can find something nice and complicated.
Well, what I'll say while you're looking for that is that I don't think anyone's picked up on the Easter egg, like the ultimate Easter egg. Extremely small, probably very pixelated and overexposed Easter egg. We're not going to point it out. I mean, this will be archived.
Is it the cupboard behind Jason's head?
It's not.
There's a miniature somewhere up there.
I mean, I've got a map.
Oh, there
behind
is.
me.
There is. You
Could
see
be that.
Just on top of his, right there above the top of his chair, there's something sticking out of the cupboard.
I'm trying to look if I've got anything near me to like spoil, like out of focus, but I haven't because I'm at home.
There is another question here that's asked that potentially a topical question. He's asking, will there ever be enough Master Akusa models?
No.
No.
It's quite a tricky one, to be perfectly honest. It's one of the ones that we have issues with production on to start off with. It's not though that we deliberately do, keep it out of stock. But we produce it when we can. Unfortunately, it does sell excessively well. So as soon as we put it up in the store, kind of generally sells out straight away. So, failing, we can't produce more than we do, I think, is what the answer comes to. So, there's hopefully a solution that's coming down in the pipeline, though, that will resolve that.
Yeah. And there is another quick question here as well, again, that I'll sort of skim over. It's asking with regards to Errata and sort of corrections in that relation. Do we have a plan in place for that?
I think that's a Jason thing, isn't it?
There's definitely a plan. You can see the Errata, the development work on the Errata is basically done. Obviously, as new things come up, we keep adding to it. But there is a document out there. There's a PDF that you can get at. Obviously, everything got slowed down in the last year. This was supposed to be out literally last year, in fact, as a full document. But it's just taking time to make it into a proper sort of Bushido PDF like the tournament pack is. And also to update the cards so that we can have up-to-date cards that you can at least download as a PDF or as an image from the store. That's the bit that's taking the time. I would encourage everybody to use the PDF that's out there now. That's what I use when I play. Eventually we will get it out to you. It's just one of those things, like everything else. I know Gordon and Norden spend a lot of time just making sure that we're getting the new models out and getting the things and restocks and things that people need to be able to play, and we just haven't had the time over the last year to do these extra things that we also need to do. Whereas like my bit of it was quite easy because I was sat in a small box anyway in the middle of London and had nothing else to do. So my bit got done, but other people were busier doing other things.
Anyone would think there was a pandemic on.
Use the PDF that is out there. There are links to it on all the social media and I think on the forums if anybody still goes there. But the cards will take a while to get relayed out. Is what we're waiting on at the moment.
I can say I have put the errata on the cards into the Battlescribe file. I think there might have been a couple of changes to like core errata since I did that, but the profile errata should be in there. And actually on Battlescribe, the release wave Shiho will be about a week or so. Yeah.
Cool. Right.
Brilliant.
Okay. Got one more. Is that us? That's us up to.
Well, I guess it's Ben's at the helm. Are we carrying on doing a couple more, or do you want to call it there?
I mean, people are probably going to start disappearing to watch football, aren't they? When does it happen? Is that now?
8 p.m. UK time, I believe.
Oh, right.
There's going to be a. Oh well, there's another quick question here. Might be able to answer with a one-word answer. When will when? If I can get my teeth back in, when can we expect a campaign book?
That's a perennial question.
If I had my way, for once I'm not the hold up in this, it would be out.
Not me
but
either.
I think what Jason might be taking something out of his folder there.
That is it so far.
Yeah, it's sooner than people might expect based off what Jason just showed us, though.
that isn't just blank paper.
Yeah,
it looks a bit blank, but it's not. Well,
no, we are actively working on a campaign system at the moment to coincide with a law book as well. So I think the next 12 months in terms of Bushido from that aspect is going to be pretty great. Jason's working on loads of new scenarios, campaign system. Alistair's doing great work on the law. Just keeps adding pages and adding pages. So it's going to be a really interesting book when it does get released. You'll have loads of new ways to play Bushido. Campaign system, as said, loads of law. Possibly even some maps. Who knows? We will go with it. But within 12 months, definitely. But hopefully sooner than that.
brilliant.
Can I? Alex mentioned it before we went live, but just people might want to know what GCT's attitude is currently towards events.
That's a good question, and I'm kind of. We took the decision early in the year for multiple reasons that we wouldn't attend shows this year as per last year where we didn't attend. Some people will be disappointed in that, I'm guessing. But it's such a tough one with everything that's going on at the moment. Just to plan things was very difficult. And for those of you that do attend shows as exhibitors or whatever, there's quite an excessive amount of planning and logistics that goes in behind the scenes just to get a show set up, and with the uncertainty of things, it just didn't warrant the time to do that, with the potential that the shows may not go ahead or whatever the case may be. So we took the decision early not to do shows this year. Next year we'll be back to the full show schedules. That's including Gen Con, Adepticon, etc. Which I can't wait for, to be honest with you. I've really missed the shows. UK Games Expo we'll definitely do next year. Brexity things, who knows? We hopefully do Spiel next year, but I don't know what will be involved in that. Now it'll be our first post-Brexit European show, so that could be quite interesting in its own right. The only show we will attend this year will be Salute, and that's predominantly because logistically for us it's quite easy. It's local, so it's quite an easy show to plan for us. So Salute the only show this year. As from next year, back to doing all the shows we regularly do. We're going to try squeeze in some other shows as well next year. So any players out there, want us to attend a show that you go to, drop us a line or whatever. We're definitely interested to look at whatever shows we can attend next year.
And people running demos always welcome volunteers.
Yes.
I remember putting an hour in a Salute one year and just not being able to speak for the rest of the day, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Great. Cool.
So there are a couple more questions coming through in the YouTube chat. People seem to want to carry on. We've got an hour yet before the football, but well, maybe answer a couple more. Is there anything at the end of the vision board? Is there a final destination for Bushido?
That's a massively complex question, I guess. I think, when we started at Bushido, there was never an end game to it, if that's what the question entails. But I think, as long as people are enjoying Bushido, they keep playing it. Collectively, I guess we'll keep producing it. That said, if people stop, there's no interest in it, then I guess, there will be some final game. In terms of the lore or anything like that, there is no final game plan as such. I think I speak for myself personally, definitely in for the long haul. It's I love every aspect of Bushido. I love creating the game. There's nothing about it I don't like. Sometimes I'll barely ache. There's obviously a lot of work involved, which some people may not, quite appreciate the amount of work that goes on in the backgrounds to produce what appears to be quite a simple game. But that said, I love even when it's difficult. I love every part about it. So I'm definitely in for the long haul. So from GCT perspective, there's no end game, is what I can say.
I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about these games where they are under increasing burden. Every time you release a new thing, there's a higher logistical burden, there's a higher design space burden. It's why we have editions, is to press the reset button and sort of streamline for how the game has changed. At some point, you have so many products and so many things to keep in line. Yeah, it's who knows when that breaks you. I don't know.
So the weight of admin.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Brings down empires, eh?
Yeah.
We're telling various stories at the moment in the Joie Isles, and those we have definite endpoints for. Whether we know what's going to happen at the end, we don't know all of those. We've got some plans for a sort of player-led sort of writing campaign where you can tell us the results on some Google form, and that will determine the outcome of the story that we're telling. And so we have plans for those, like the Dragon Civil War, the return of Errata. We know sort of broadly where they're going. But I think it's just we're creating an environment to tell stories in. So once those stories are done, more will happen. And others are overlapping all the time. The clients, or while all this is going on, what are the Savage Way doing, that kind of thing. There's no reason that we should have it all sort of build to some big crescendo and explode.
Brilliant. So it's not quite the MCU phased approach just yet, but what I'm getting from this is watch this space and we might see stuff like that.
Cool. I think we are pretty much at the end of questions.
Cool.
So I don't know, does anyone have anything that they would like to say before we wrap up?
No.
Wakamoto are the best.
Well, I was just going to point out that zombies will outlive everyone. So I think the end game of Bushido is Yore wins, we all live happily ever after, or we all unlive happily ever after.
We just have to change the rise rule.
No, definitely. I just want to thank Robot Dice Explosion for hosting. It's always fun to chat. And everyone on the team for giving these Sunday evenings to participate. Yeah, just thanks everyone and anyone that's listening. Obviously, thank you very much. Hopefully, you can give us some feedback and we can do this again sometime. Eh?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us. I'll do a couple of Robot Dice Explosion things quickly. Ol and I actually recorded an episode the other day, which I still haven't edited together. So that'll be coming out at some point over the next week. We talk about special attacks and defences.
Topical.
Yeah, topical, because one of them, of course, belongs to the guy who's on screen. I didn't plan it. It keeps happening. So yeah, there's that. We are trying to get back to doing a little bit more stuff. Life has been weird. That's the third time I've said it for this stream, but yeah, it's been a weird one. So
yeah, it's starting to become more practical to do now.
yeah, we're playing games. We're going to a tournament next Sunday. We're going to a tournament, so we will probably try and record something about our stupid ideas behind lists, what we think will happen, and then the usual debrief of what went horribly, horribly wrong. Except for Adam, of course.
We might even record at the tournament. We'll see.
Can I just say that I do quite like the I can't think of the word now for it, the concept of a car cast. There's something raw and unedited about the setup of three guys talking in the car on the way back from a tournament.
Depends which car we go in, like, which one's better insulated.
Yeah, maybe not in a convertible down the motorway, but might be that hard to hear.
Why did you take that? Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I'm going to see if I can read a story to my son, and then yeah, I don't know, sit in a heap.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys. Good night, then.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Shiho's coming home. Shiho's coming home.
I'll
They
stop
were
it.
lawfully evicted.